What if buying a home didn't have to be one of the most stressful times in your life? According to a Zillow survey, 50% of buyers cried at least once during the home buying process. It can be a very complex and stressful time. So today I'm going to give you an overview of the entire process. And at the end, I'll share 5 tips with you on how to make buying a home go as smoothly as possible. So let's get started. I'm Angela Evans with Cincinnati, Ohio Living. I get calls, texts, and emails regularly from people just like you. So whether you're looking to move in 9 days or 9 months, or maybe you just have some questions about moving or the current market, you can reach me at 513-951-3584. By the way, if you like the information I share on my channel, make sure you hit subscribe and tap the bell for notifications. First up is the pre-approval. This is a crucial first step that is often overlooked by buyers. Finding out how much you can afford before starting to look is extremely helpful, and in today's market, it's almost necessary to have the pre-approval in hand when you're submitting an offer. This lets sellers know that you're a serious, qualified buyer, and it's just one of the ways you can strengthen your offer. You can expect to provide pay stubs, W-2s, 1099s, and tax returns for the last 2 years. You'll also have to submit things like bank statements, retirement account statements, and any net worth of businesses that you may own. Plus, you'll have to let them know about any debt that you have. Student loans, a car loan, an existing mortgage, credit card debt, things like that. While this is all going to show up eventually when they pull your credit, it is just helpful to have that information handy. The next step is to find a realtor. Most of the time, this is actually the first step that home buyers take because they may not have an established relationship with a lender and they may need some guidance on where to start. It's important to find a real estate agent you can trust and one that you know is going to have your best interests in mind. I really enjoy helping people buy a home when the time is right for them. So whether that's in a week or month or a year, I'm going to always advocate for what's best for you as the buyer. Before you're able to look at any homes with your realtor, you'll have to sign a buyer's representation agreement, which details out the expectations and compensation. Did you know that you could book a free Zoom call with me? We can discuss what you're looking for, where you might be in the home buying process, and see if we'd be a good fit to work together. This is a completely free meeting, and I strongly believe in not pressuring people to buy until the time is right for them. Book your call today using the link in the description box below. Next, you're going to want to discuss what you're looking for with your realtor. They'll need to know your pre-approval amount or what amount you're willing to spend if it's not up to your pre-approval amount, and your time frame for buying. They'll also want to know if you have any desired areas or special requirements, like maybe you need to live in a certain school district, you might need to be located close to your employer, you may need a home that's handicap accessible, things like that. Plus, what size and type of home you might like, and other non-negotiable items like the number of bedrooms or bathrooms, and if you need a garage, if you want a basement. All of this discussion helps you and your realtor work together for the next step, which is searching for homes. This allows homes that fit your criteria to be sent to you immediately or daily or weekly. I like to set my clients up on this and also have the email sent to me, so that way in case they're busy at work and I see something come across my desk that I think would be a great match for them, I can kind of send a follow-up reminder and let them know, hey, I saw this property and I really think it might be of interest to you. So if you haven't already done so at this point, you'll definitely need to sign that buyer representation agreement that I mentioned before. And that is required prior to touring any homes, whether that's in person or virtually. This is something newer to the real estate industry and is intended to create transparency for buyers and sellers. One pointer that I have for buyers is that if you see a home that you might like and fits your criteria, I always recommend that you drive past the home. Sometimes it might be positioned on a busy street that you weren't really expecting, or there might be something like a railroad track across the street. Maybe the neighbor's house sits a little too close. Things that you can't really see when you're looking at pictures on a computer. So I always recommend to drive past the home, and that can kind of give you a better idea right off the bat if you get a chance to take a look at the lot and you still want to see it, then it's time to contact your realtor to schedule a showing. Now, if you're out of town, this is something that's going to have to be done virtually, whether it is a FaceTime video tour or just having conversations using Google Maps and aerial photos from the county auditor site. Those are things that you can do if you are not actually located in the city that you're looking in. So once you have gotten pre-approved, found your realtor that you want to work with, and had discussions with them and start to search for homes, and then once you find what you think is the right home, it's time to write an offer. When your realtor writes a purchase contract, they will need to know what type of financing you're using, how much money you're going to be putting down, how soon you want or need the closing to be, if you want to have an inspection, if you want title insurance, and if you want a home warranty. And sometimes there are other contingencies that might need to be written into the contract depending on the property that's for sale. Now, at the time of this video, there isn't a lot of time that passes between viewing the property and writing the offer. So the more of the details that you can have hashed out ahead of time, the better. At the time of this video, the average days on market for Hamilton County, which is where downtown Cincinnati is located, and many of its surrounding suburbs, is only about 5. So generally speaking, homes right now are still moving fairly quickly. Now, they're not moving in 1 or 2 days all the time like we were seeing during the early COVID years, but they are definitely still selling historically quickly at this time. Now, that's something that's always changing, and your local realtor will understand the nuances of the market that you're located in. For example, if homes are sitting on the market for less than a week, your agent will know that time is of the essence, and if you really love the home, you better be ready to put your offer in probably the same day. And on the flip side, they'll also know that if a property's been sitting for months, or maybe it's gone on under contract and then come back on the market several times, they'll understand what aspects you might be able to negotiate and what would make sense for a purchase price. When I have a buyer, I personally always look up comparable properties that have recently sold or are currently for sale to see, where they are at in comparison to what we are writing an offer on. And I also take into consideration the school district it's located within. Maybe it's a neighborhood that is really close to a brand new large company headquarters that's opening, or if the home has multiple offers already, that is helpful to know going in writing your offer. So now that you've submitted your offer, it can either be accepted, rejected, or countered, which leads to our next step, negotiations. So if your offer is accepted as is, then great, you can jump ahead to the next step. In many cases, though, you'll often receive a counteroffer or a flat-out rejection. If it's rejected, your realtor is going to want to find out why. Maybe it was the price, maybe it was some of the contingencies that you had written in, maybe you didn't have your pre-approval ready, or maybe they just had a better offer on the table. Sometimes there's really nothing that you can do other than to go back and just start looking for more homes. If you receive a counteroffer, your realtor will discuss what this counteroffer means and help you understand it. And they will also help guide you through if you should counter to that or if you should accept the counteroffer that the seller provided. This can be a stressful part of the process, and it's important that you're clear on your non-negotiables and make sure you ask questions so you can determine if this is really the best deal for you or not. So once you and the seller have agreed to terms on the purchase contract, yay! Now you can move on to the next step, which is offer acceptance. While it's really exciting to get to this point, we're not at the closing table just yet. Your realtor will send all the signed final documents to the necessary parties like the title company, your lender that you're using, and then you'll get the next step of the process started, which is the formal loan application. So if you're a cash buyer and you're not using financing, then you get to skip this step. But for those here using financing, this is the part where the lender will formally verify all of your income, employment, credit reports, and they'll order an appraisal, which typically ends up happening after the home inspection if you have a home inspection scheduled. Once you've submitted all of the necessary documents and paid your application fee, which usually gets applied to the appraisal, and your closing costs, the lender will issue the intent to proceed per the terms of the contract. Usually while the formal loan application is taking place, you're also going to be conducting the home inspection if you opted in for that. Hey, if you're new to my channel and you like what you see, would you hit that thumbs up? And while you're at it, you can hit subscribe and tap the bell for notification. I'll be posting new videos every single week, and that way you can stay current on Cincinnati, Ohio living. So the next step, the home inspection, is a contingency that you can choose to put in the contract or not. You are not required to conduct an inspection, but I generally always recommend it, especially for first-time home buyers, but even for seasoned buyers, just for their own protection. I personally have always conducted an inspection on a property that I was going to buy, and I've had to back out of a few deals for either major electrical issues that were unforeseen at the time of the offer, or major plumbing issues that were unforeseen. So things do come up, and that's the reason why you have the inspection contingency as an option. The inspection usually runs a few $100s, but it is well worth it, especially if something comes up that you didn't know about when writing your offer. I have personally had electrical issues come up that were going to be well over $10,000 to fix. Not to mention, we weren't going to be able to insure the property until those items were fixed. So that was an example that we decided, you know what, this isn't going to make sense for us. And the seller and us could not come to terms on things. So we had to walk away from that deal. Even if you decide you don't want to back out, you can submit what's called a defect notice, where you ask the seller to repair X, Y, and Z prior to closing, or you can ask for an amount off the purchase price or credit at closing from the seller to pay for those repairs needed. There are a lot of options here, and it's best to discuss it with your realtor if that comes up, to determine the best course of action for you. So something else you're going to be doing in the same time frame, which is in the first 1 to 2 weeks, is finding out how much it is going to cost to insure the home. You'll want to get a homeowner's insurance quote to make sure that you can afford it and to make sure that the house is insurable. Here in Cincinnati, Ohio, the homeowner's insurance contingency is 14 days. So you have 14 days from when your contract is accepted to figure out if you can get your homeowner's insurance, if it's affordable, and if you're able to obtain it. Also during this time frame is when the appraisal is usually done. If you're a cash buyer, then this part doesn't apply to you and you can skip to the next step again. So the lender will order the appraisal when you've completed your formal loan application, and then the appraiser will schedule the appraisal directly with the seller. That's nothing that the buyer needs to be there for. And then once they've determined the appraised value, they'll notify the lender, who in turn generally always notifies the real estate agents so that they can notify their buyer and seller. If the home appraises for at or above the agreed on purchase price on the contract, then you're good to move on to the next step. However, if the home appraises for lower than the agreed upon purchase price, you'll need to do some renegotiations here, which could either mean the seller needs to drop their price to come down to the appraised price, or the buyer has the option to bring the difference to the closing table. So for example, let's say you're going to buy a $200,000 house. You've agreed, you have a contract for $200,000, and the appraisal comes back at $195,000. Your options are to negotiate with the seller that they either come down to the $195,000. You as the buyer can say, I will bring the extra $5,000 to closing and pay for that difference. Obviously, you can work this out using a little bit of both ways, negotiating it down a little bit and then bringing a little bit to closing. There are lots of different options there. Now, if the buyer and seller cannot come to an agreement after this, then they may walk away from the deal and the home would go back on the market. I have found that usually by this point, the buyer and seller can generally come to terms on things. If you're offering $300,000 on a $200,000 house because it's really the home that you love, but the appraisal comes back at $220,000, that's a big difference of $80,000 that you're going to have to figure out how to negotiate. So that's just something to consider. I generally don't encourage people to write offers that are way over asking unless they have the funds to make up that difference. Are you thinking about making a move? Or maybe you just want to talk through it to see if now is the best time for you or not. You can reach out to me at 513-951-3584 or ange.sells.cincy@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. The next, and usually one of the final steps, is the loan underwriting. If you're not using financing, then this step doesn't apply to you. But once the lender has all the documents they need, you've gotten through the inspections, your appraisal came back where it needed to, then they submit all the documentation to their underwriting department. Essentially, they're looking at all of the income and expenses that you have and determining if they want to loan you the money or not, and if they might have some other additional documents that they might need to request. Most of the time, if you've made it up to this point, that's a really good sign. But just be aware that sometimes things can still come up. Sometimes you might have to submit additional documents. Maybe Aunt Susie gave you $5,000 as a gift and they want to know where that money came from. So you might have to provide a letter from Aunt Susie saying, I gave so-and-so this amount of money as a gift, and it does not need to be repaid. Something like that. Or maybe you have a cousin with the same exact name as you who has terrible debt, or maybe a lot of outstanding back taxes or something, and you'll have to certify or verify that that's not you and that's a different person. They'll also have to verify that you haven't taken out any new debt, so hold off on buying that brand new car or motorcycle until we get past closing. Once you get through this step, the lender will issue a clear to close. This is usually 1 to 3 days at the very latest prior to closing. Sometimes lenders are a little ahead of things and they can get it done a week early, but most of the time it's right around that 3 days before closing mark. However, if things get held up in that final underwriting process, just know that your closing date may have to get pushed back if they don't have the clear to close from the lender in time. Once you have the clear to close, you'll want to schedule utilities to change over to your name for the closing date. You will call providers to establish the new service in your name for your gas and electric, your water, your trash, and any phone or internet, things like that you want. The seller will also call to cancel or stop the service on their end on the closing date. And then usually 24 to 48 hours before closing, you have the option to do a final walkthrough with your realtor. You might want to check to make sure that when they were moving out, they didn't accidentally break a window or put a hole in the wall, or that they didn't remove the refrigerator that was in the kitchen when you wrote the offer, or that a bunch of trash or debris isn't laying around. Unless, of course, you bought the home as is, knowing that none of that stuff was going to be cleaned up. Then usually a day or two before closing, the title company will send you instructions on how to wire your funds for your down payment and closing costs. You will likely have to physically go into your bank and have them wire the funds to the title company with the special instructions that they gave you. It's important to know that wire fraud is real, and if you ever get a request to wire funds from someone that you haven't been dealing with throughout this entire process, you should probably call the people you have been dealing with just to confirm, hey, I got this email from this person. They want me to wire these funds. Is this correct? Most of the time, the answer is going to be yes, but just know that people do commit wire fraud and you don't want that to happen to you. All right, so we're almost there. One of the last steps is to attend your closing. Yay! You'll need a valid ID, and if you live in a dour state like Ohio, you'll want to make sure that your spouse is also there, even if they're not on the loan or the deed. Get ready to sign a lot of documents. And then once that's all done, congratulations, you're actually officially a homeowner now. Now, if you're traveling or going to be out of town or on vacation at the time that closing is scheduled, you can always do that ahead of time or arrange to do it remotely. And if the seller didn't need extended occupancy past the closing date, then you'll get the keys to the house at closing. And finally, welcome home. You're officially able to start working on or moving into your new home. All right, so as promised, here are 5 tips to help make the home buying process as low stress as possible. Number 1, get pre-approved before looking and set a realistic budget that you can afford, which includes knowing what your top dollar is and not letting external pressure like parents or friends or siblings take over. One way that I personally like to determine my top dollar, within my pre-approved amount of course, is to ask myself, if I found out that this home sold for X amount, would I be upset and would I have been willing to pay that amount for it? Now, obviously, if this is a $300,000 house and my budget, my pre-approved amount is $300,000, then I can't do much about that. But let's say I'm pre-approved for $500,000, but I just want a $300,000 house. And then I found out that somebody offered and got the house for $310,000. Would I have paid $310,000 for that house? Probably. That's kind of one way that I personally like to look at it. That's not going to work for everybody, but that's just something that I do. Number 2, hire a local realtor that you trust and that will go above and beyond for you. Number 3, use a reputable lender, one that isn't going to leave you hanging or miss deadlines. Your realtor will have excellent recommendations because they have worked with all kinds of lenders and they've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And make sure you listen to your lender on what not to do and what to do up until closing. Number 4, expect things to come up on inspections. No home is perfect, not even new construction homes. Most of the time, these defects can be worked through fairly easily. It's kind of unnecessary to get all worked up and stressed out about it. And number 5, ask questions and clarify often. Don't make assumptions. That usually never ends up going well for anyone. Do you think I missed anything in the home buying process? Comment below and let me know what you think I missed. Or if you think I covered everything, comment below with 100%. Reading your comments is really helpful to me and also helps me determine what types of videos I should make. So I hope this video helped you understand the home buying process in more detail. Some of these details might vary based on what state you live in, but overall, this is what you can expect when it's time to buy a home. If you're ready to take that next step, give me a call today at 513-951-3584. Do you have a home to sell before you buy your next one? Then make sure you check out my video on what to do prior to selling your home and reach out to me using my contact information in the description box below. Thanks for watching today.